So do you think, the next question was, how do you think triathlon generally has the ability, what should they do to improve that image? Is it a question for WADA to step up and take more control over the sport, or?
Yeah, I mean, WADA's effectiveness could be debated as well. I mean, often they appear to be more of a political organization, and that's a fact, but they have to be because there's the individual country NATOs that actually do the testing. WADA would have to be funded significantly more and given powers by the IOC to be totally independent and controlling the results. I think that's a model that people could get behind. Right now, it's hit and miss country to country how strong their anti-doping organizations are. Some of them are testing quite frequently, some of them very rarely. And in order to have faith in the system, you've got to have these out-of-competition tests year-round. And it's got to be done in a targeted way so that you're looking for, the blood passport thing. For example, it's a very powerful tool, but it has to be used, and you've got to have a lot of tests in order to have a good data set. So, that is not happening everywhere. The ITU, for example, in triathlon for Olympic athletes has a small testing pool that they're able to target test. Their budget is very modest, but they do have the ability to do that. So the efforts are being there, but we need this way more funded. We see now with the Russian tennis player, with her positive, I think it was a quote today, her personal budget is bigger than WADA's. So, that's the kind of environment we're dealing in. And, I think the good thing about triathlon is that I know you can win clean. It's not a sport where it's impossible. I'm sure many cyclists thought for some years, impossible to compete in a Grand Tour clean. Where I know we can win clean, we're doing it, so I feel at least optimistic in this way. I think that's a good message, for triathlon, is we don't need that culture, we don't have it. That doesn't mean that people aren't going to do it, and, be watching this year for performances coming from maybe not out of nowhere, but from lower levels to quite big jumps. Usually that doesn't really happen, everyone hopes and dreams in the winter, and everyone improves marginally, but if there's big differences in performances, we'll be looking at that with some skepticism, as you have to. I think in the modern high-performance sporting environment, that's the legacy of those that have come before, is we have to answer questions like that.
Yeah, and I suppose swimming, cycling and running all have history of ever improving, and the predecessors of the previous records were also done, and you have to question the current holders, I suppose. But is it the results in Kona or outside of Kona or in Ironman or in Olympics because Olympic distance running times are getting faster?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly what's happening in cycling. We look at the climbing times of other years, for example, and our sport is a bit younger than that. I mean, I don't think, obviously fast times raise some sort of questions, but I don't think we have quite the data set that we have in some of these more mature sports where they've been doing the same thing many, many years. We have different conditions. Even the temperature for running can make a huge difference. Conditions, wind, etc. So we don't have quite that same background, but it's always worth looking at everything. It's not just the times, though. I think it's big changes in performance. It's miraculous recovery from injuries. It's that kind of stuff that you see in professional sports, and that raise big questions of how do these athletes overcome these kind of injuries, but probably very difficult without some pharmaceutical help, right? And those are the kind of things that stop us from improving, or that stop most athletes from getting to where they want to go, is those kind of roadblocks. And that's what a lot of performance enhancing drugs are about, is not necessarily just racing faster, but training more effectively. And then of course you will if you're having less interruptions.
Yeah, so on that, looking at naturally performance-enhancing techniques with athletes, with triathletes particularly, how in the future are you seeing, what is the next stage, or what is the next sort of, not secret, but what are your thoughts about, is it diet, is it fat adaptation, or is it technology that's improving, or is it just the athlete, just that consistency and the hard work?
Yeah. My big message that I always come back to is do the basics really well. Some of this stuff can help us do the basics, but we're also seeing an explosion in ability to measure stuff. But we're not yet at the point, and almost no sport is, of understanding all what this data and information means. And that can be a hindrance. That can make you question or doubt what you're doing, or even not even understand, what does all this mean? And there's a real risk for many coaches and athletes that we're complexifying something that isn't necessarily going to lead to a performance improvement. So I really see my job as being a filter. Like, what do we really need to do? What's really important? I'm not a big fan of experimenting with elite athletes in particular with a lot of this stuff, because we have so much stuff to do already. We just want to keep it simple. However, that doesn't mean that there will be improvement. Certainly, measuring and understanding recovery and readiness to train, as that evolves, that could be very powerful. We still come back to the holistic, organism, the holistic person, and so it's how do you measure psychological factors? How do you measure mood? How do you measure all of these things that then indicate readiness to train? And that will progress, but everything that we use there, we want to come back to making basic, better, good decisions all the time. That leads to consistency in training. So I don't see it so much as real performance enhancement, kind of. However, looking at how do we optimize the day-to-day better? How do we make better decisions? How do we avoid making bad decisions? If any of that stuff can help us do that, then that can be very powerful. If we could go back in time, hindsight is always 20/20, but stop doing one session that we know was overloading an athlete and maybe they suffered an injury. If there was some information that we had that could help us make that decision, that would be very powerful. We're still trying to understand what all this is. So there's heart rate variability, which is expansion on the old school morning heart rate. There's hydration status. There's questionnaires, mood questionnaires, this sort of stuff. There's soreness. There's different things you can use in training logs. There's many different things just in that area. However, there's not one clear standout. What I use is body language and mood. I think it's the most powerful indicator. There was a study recently that was looking at all this stuff and said that ultimately for coaches, subjective measures are still more powerful than analytical than analytical measures. However, what subjectivity is for coaching is looking at everything, and that's ultimately what we're doing. That's so even the ability to measure power cycling, speed running. Of course, we always did speeds in swimming. However, you use all those things together, and now you've got a new layer of information to look at that helps you make better decisions. What are we actually doing? Is what we're doing valid? Is it what we thought we were doing? And that stuff is quite powerful. Often we're not achieving what we thought we were going to. It doesn't make it wrong, but you've got to know what kind of stimulus you're getting and what kind you're not. And now we have basically mobile labs all around us. So, in practicality for us, we don't use lab testing really anymore. Not that I ever really was a big proponent, but so we've got that ability to measure all the time.
Yeah, right. Well, I think if you struggle to comprehend all that information, I don't know what that leaves it over all the other coaches. But you mentioned getting Simon to that medal. Is that your biggest achievement to date?
Yeah, I guess it has to be in some respects because the Olympics are held in such high esteem. I think we give that to the Olympics, like we place that value on them. But certainly when you think of that, when I think of that 4-year process of going through really the blood, sweat and tears together and how challenging that was, all the ups and downs for sure, it was a great outcome, But it's because of the process, though, not just because of the outcome. Yeah. If it had been easy, I don't know if an Olympic medal is ever easy, but if it had been easy, it wouldn't have been so satisfying. And so that journey that we went together and knowing him from when he was a junior, even when he could have raced for Australia or Canada, etc., to the first years I was at the training center, then being the coach. That journey made it what it was. And even the way that he raced it, coming back kind of at the end and throwing the cap and the big sprint and then the big German coming past him. So that's what made it special, but I can think of many. It's not always the big victories. Sometimes it's the path that the athlete came or what they overcame, if they overcame an injury or just the change of performance, or the kind of relationship you have with the athlete also impacts the satisfaction of it. If you feel you have a really close partnership with somebody and you're really in it together making those decisions, those are more satisfying outcomes than ones where you might be more just like giving a program and they do it and they tell you how it's going, but it's not so close an investment in each other. In the classic example, like that's why for me when I was working in Britain, it wasn't that satisfying because for me personally as a coach, because I was really more of a manager coach there than a personal coach. And involvement in many camps with Brownlees, and saw Helen Jenkins up in Noosa this morning, for example. I have good relationships, but it's just a little bit different and not so satisfying for me.
All right, and finally, Olympic year, you're off to Rio, middle of the year. You're sipping eggnog in Glasgow in December. What needs to happen this year for you to be very satisfied?
I always said, prior to Beijing and afterwards, going into big competitions when you have athletes that that can win is something totally different. That's a very different experience than going in where you're kind of hoping, and the reality is we've got athletes that on their day can win in Rio or medal, and therefore, that would be, wanting to see that happen, it would be the most satisfying thing, and it's as I say, it's a different game doing that, because the pressure to stay there, the decisions that you have to make to get it right in terms of not overloading, not underloading, the psychological game there, it's all very significant, and it's much more challenging as a coach than any other position you can be in. So we've got, arguably at least 2 or 3 that could be in that position. That would be an amazing outcome if we hit it that well, but really want to see everybody race to their potential. In triathlon, not everything is under your control. There's different dynamics that are happening, and that's what we have to overcome every time. So I often say, of course, Olympics is big. For us, the World Series is big as well. I like to have multiple goals, so it's not all on the Olympics. And I think it's healthy for the athletes to be looking at, every race is an opportunity to express themselves and express a performance. Some of the most proud performances last year were in Auckland in our women, and we had many athletes in the top 10. Some of them the best ever result from their country, and that's also very significant. If it's the best Czech result, the best Austrian result, the best Dutch result, that's also something very proud of, an athlete to achieve that historical performance for their countries. So at the end of the year, for sure, we'd like to see those athletes on the podium or very close in Rio, and also in Cozumel in the grand final and the series. So
well, everyone at Global Sports Coach wishes you all the best in the stable for this weekend as well, but not only for the year. And thank you very much for your time.
Great, thank you.
Cheers.